Here for today's forum are Colin Van Egmond and Jeff Mangar. Each candidate will have a minute for an opening statement and a minute for a closing statement. In between, they'll be asked questions of the Modesto Bee's editorial board, led by opinions editor Garth Stapley. This is the second of the Bee's 7 candidate forums over the next week. The primary is March 3rd. Mail-in ballots go out early in February. Let's get started.
All right, we'll do opening statements first. We'll start with Jeff.
My name is Jeff Mangar. I have 22 years experience in public safety and public service, and I've dedicated my life to public safety and public service. I've been with the county for most of my professional career. I originally started out in San Diego County. My first job out of law school was doing family law in the child support division of the district attorney's office. That was a division that used to be with the district attorney's office. It's now currently a separate department. It's called now the Department of Child Support Services. After that, I applied to all 58 counties, and Stanislaus County was the first county that had an opening, and I've been here ever since. I've dedicated, like I said, my life to public safety. I have worked in numerous units and numerous divisions, including the drug unit, the civil asset forfeiture unit. I ran welfare fraud unit. I ran the real estate fraud unit. I've also been on the homicide team.
Thank you. Colleen?
Good afternoon, I'm Colin Van Egmond, and I'm an attorney here in town. I've been a civil attorney in this town for many years, been managing partner for a law firm, Swingle, Van Egmond, and Heitlinger for the past 10 years. That's a firm that we started up brand new from scratch, and so we hustled around town in terms of getting new clients in, starting up a brand new firm, putting protocols in place, and we've been very successful over the last 10 years. I have handled many different areas of law. Our county has over 6,600 civil litigation cases that are filed annually. I have over 13 years of civil experience in nearly every type of civil case that there is. Our county has over 7,000 family law cases, which are filed yearly, and I have over 6 years of experience in family law cases and or the business components of those cases in terms of asset divisions and tax ramifications. Our county has over 600, or 800, I believe, probate cases filed, and over 8 years of probate cases.
Thank you very much. Okay, let's get started with sort of a big picture question. What do you perceive as the greatest obstacles to justice? Colleen, we're going to rotate, so we'll start with you.
The biggest obstacle to justice, in my opinion, is making sure that as a judge you can be fair and equitable to everybody. And what that means is when someone walks in the door, it doesn't matter what their background is, it doesn't matter what their religion is, it doesn't matter what they believe in that you just apply the law fairly and equitably, no matter who that person is from our community. It doesn't matter if they have a lot of money or they don't have a lot of money. Because a person who doesn't have a lot of money deserves the same kind of respect and service from our judges and from our court staff as someone who has a lot of money and that can throw it around and attempt to get hearings sooner, faster, with more attorneys, etc. So justice, in my mind, is making sure that everybody is treated fairly and equitably, the law is applied fairly and equitably to everybody.
Very good. Jeff?
In addition to treating everyone fairly and equally, I think a way to improve the justice system more is to have more court efficiency. Currently, we have backlog of cases, and in fact, I just finished a murder case not too long ago in which the case was 10 years old. It was a drive-by shooting with gang members not too far from where we are here today, right by John Thurman Field, where on 4th of July, someone drove by and with a machine gun mowed everybody in the front yard who were celebrating 4th of July that evening. And that case was delayed 10 years. Of course, there are reasons for it. The first defense attorney on the case died. The second defense attorney retired because that case was taking so long. And so the third defense attorney was the one who actually brought that case to trial. So that's just an example of a case that's taking too long. And fortunately, we have witnesses who forget and witnesses who cannot locate.
Thank you. If you were to observe a party in your courtroom who was being poorly represented by an unprepared or ineffective lawyer, how would you handle the situation? Jeff?
Well, I would give the attorney time to prepare. If they were unprepared, there are several remedies that are available in addition to just sanctions. But if an attorney is unprepared, then you could allow either a brief moment for the attorney to talk to his client, or have a short continuance so that attorney can be prepared to address any type of issues that are popping up in their current case. A lot of times cases get continued because of further investigation or something like that. But if there's a breakdown in the relationship between the client and the attorney, then the court has to take the matter into its own hands and either appoint a new attorney or allow that attorney to get up to speed to make sure that they're prepared to address any type of issues with that client or defendant.
Colleen, you okay with that, or would you do something different?
I think as judges, we have an obligation that's a bit higher in terms of our obligations. And I think that there's probably multiple steps. If it's the first time that this attorney is in your courtroom and they're not prepared, but normally they are prepared, I think the first, protocol probably would be, hey, you're not prepared this time around, what's going on, do you need a short continuance? But I'm not sure that continuances are necessarily the solution either, because we as attorneys have a high obligation that we are obligated to meet. And if this is something that's regularly occurring, I think as judges, we have an obligation to look at the State Bar Rule of Ethics and see if there's something that needs to be reported. We need to make sure and hold our attorneys accountable for being professional, being prepared, and for making sure that they're adequately, representing their clients in court. And if they're falling below the standard of care, I think as judges, we have an obligation to report that.
I don't know that everybody knows that. Do judges then, are they expected to report attorneys? Does that happen?
It depends on the situation. If there's sanctioned, it's above $1,000, and that's reportable to the state bar.
Reportable or mandatory?
It's mandatory they report to the state bar. One of the competing interests, though, is that if you have an unprepared attorney and they're forced to go forward, then there could be a later claim by either the client or the defendant that there's ineffective assistance to counsel, and that all that time that was taken to go forward with that hearing or jury trial or proceedings then gets reversed and you have to start all over. So it actually wastes more time if that attorney comes to court unprepared. But they do have an ethical obligation to come to court prepared and to advocate zealously for their clients.
Yeah. Anything to add to that, Colleen?
Yeah, and I would just say, I think some of the differences in what my opponent and I are talking about is the difference in, he primarily practices in criminal world and I primarily practice in the civil world. And so there are often times that if attorney's conduct is not appropriate, is not in compliance with state bar rules and regulations, that it would be appropriate for judges to report that on our side of things. And on the civil side, a lot of times a short continuance is maybe 5, 10, 15 days, but kicking it out too far could have strong ramifications to all the parties involved.
I want to thank you for pointing out the major difference between the two of you and your experience. Colleen has extensive experience in civil law and Jeff in criminal law. Is one more valuable than the other to a judge? Let's see. Colleen just answered, so we'll start with Colleen on that.
In terms of more valuable, not necessarily. I think both are equally important for our system and for our county. But what we have here is we have a Stanislaus County where we've had 3 civil judges in the past several years who had primarily a civil background leave because of retirement. We're losing 2 more civil judges, and our 3rd retiree is Judge Steffens, who had primarily a civil background going onto the bench. What I believe is important is that our bench represents backgrounds that include the entire community of lawyers and our entire community of what is filed within our court system. And right now we're deficient in terms of having civil experience on the bench. That's one of the reasons why I'm running, is because of my extensive experience in civil and appellate and probate and all these other areas. I could literally fit into any one of these benches on the civil side and pick up, start without having to, do much research at all. And we need to make sure that we are represented on both sides of the legal field, civil and criminal, but one is not more important than the other.
I may have a follow-up to that, but I want to let Jeff answer that first.
Well, I think what the key question is someone who has jury trial experience, someone who has experience in the courtroom. Because whether you're doing civil trials or jury trials, it's the rules of evidence applies equally to both. So I think the key component here is not so much about the background in civil or criminal, but more of the experience in doing jury trials. You know, we're running for a Superior Court trial judge position. This is to be a trial judge. That's what Superior Courts are all about. It's about trials. And someone with more trial experience, I think, is a key difference and the key component there. 3 of the last 4 judges to assume the role on the bench had a civil background. Only 1 of them had a primarily criminal background. So 3 of the 4 past judges have criminal. So I personally believe that there's a lack of people with criminal backgrounds on the bench. You have 11 judges that currently work in the criminal field, criminal trials, and that's because there are more criminal trials that are going out. We have 173 trials that went out. 168 of those were criminal.
Okay, but I think you said 11 criminal court judges. How many are civil then?
Well, we have 4 that just do civil, and then you also have family law judges, as well as you have dependency and probate.
Okay, but isn't it true that you could be assigned to a civil court?
Correct. I could also be, it's up to the presiding judge where you get assigned. I could, generally, people get assigned to arraignments, or they get sent to juvenile, or you could get sent to civil. It's up to the presiding judge as to where you get.
If the presiding judge were to assign you to a civil court, how would you get up to speed?
Well, I think, I'd like to think I'm a quick learner. In fact, right after law school, I was asked to be one of the bar exam graders, and the bar exam covers all subject areas, not just criminal law. So I was a bar exam grader after graduating from law school. Then, since I've been an attorney for almost a decade now, I've been a specialist in criminal law that requires expertise in your specific field. I'm one of 7 in our county who is a criminal law expert. Also, there are 11 fields that you become a certified specialist in, and my opponent isn't a specialist in any of those areas. So I like to think that once I do dwell into a certain subject, that I like to get up to speed and learn that subject matter pretty quickly. I've also attended most continuing education classes through this bar association with the county, and those deal primarily in civil topics.
Colleen, if you were assigned to a criminal court, how would you get up to speed?
I could get up to speed really quickly. So I also sit Judge Pro Tem for traffic court, which is an element of criminal. So there's 35,000 criminal cases filed in traffic court on a yearly basis, and I already sit Judge Pro Tem, which means I already handle arraignments and I already handle court trials for traffic court. Also, with my experience as managing partner of our law firm, that has been one of my tasks all along. When an attorney leaves and they leave a caseload of files, 60 to 100 files, it might not necessarily be the area of law that I practice, and it might not be my cases, but when that attorney leaves, they leave behind the files, and it's been my job as managing partner over a weekend or a week to get caught up to speed on all of those files and make sure that those clients are protected. I've had to do that quite a few times over the last 10 years, and so I feel like because I have experience in doing that and getting caught up to speed on cases that I know nothing about, areas of law that I may not have handled before, I'm able to do it quickly and efficiently because I've had to do it before, multiple times over.
Very good. Let's turn things a bit personally now and just talk about some of the major influences in your life. Colleen.
Major influence in my life is my parents. I grew up on a dairy. My dad and my mom worked from sunup to sundown. And that was, that's instilled in me. I've worked 60, 70, 80 hours a week in my law firm, either working on cases or donating my time, providing pro bono services to elderly people in our community. But those number of hours have never changed over the years. And that comes from the hard work ethic that my parents instilled in me. And I intend to give back to our community as judge for Stanislaus County, putting in the same amount of hard work that I was raised to do.
Very good. Jeff?
My biggest influence in my life has also been my parents. Both of my parents naturalized here and immigrated to the United States. My dad came from South America, and he came here with a scholarship when he was 16 years old to complete school, and he was the first person in his family to go to college, and he was the first person in his family to complete and get a college education. My mom also immigrated to the United States. My mom came from the Philippines. She was born and raised in the Philippines. She became a nurse, and then in her early 20s, she immigrated to the United States to pursue that nursing career. Unfortunately, my mom was only here on a work visa, so after 3 years, and after meeting my dad and marrying him, after 3 years, my mom had to go back to the Philippines because her work visa had expired, and she had to reapply. After about 8 months, she was able to come back into the country and reunite with my dad, and they've been here ever since. But they instilled in us that work ethic and the pride of having to immigrate here to the United States and with just a few dollars and hope in their heart. That's what they did, and they instilled that in us.
Have you ever lost sleep thinking about a case and how you might have handled something differently? Tell us about that.
You know, I think there's always times when you think you could do something better. There's always something more, and there's always a different approach that you could always do. One of the best things about doing jury trials, though, is that you're presenting your case to the jury, and it's up to the jury to decide whether or not they find that you met your burden. The people have a heavy burden to meet, and that's why we rely on this jury system to make that tough decision, whether myself as a prosecutor, as a district attorney, have met that burden, and whether that person was, and the defendant was found guilty beyond a reasonable doubt.
Colleen?
I lose a lot of nights of sleep. In fact, I have a notepad in my bedroom when I wake up and make notes on a regular basis, nearly weekly. But it's just something, my brain does not shut off, and it's just who I am. But you're always worried about those clients, and for me, a lot of times it is, sometimes we're going into a mediation with a family that has 20 members, and you're trying to figure out how these businesses are going to be split up and how the tax ramifications are going to affect each one of them, and you're trying to figure out how the lot line adjustments are going to be done, and who's going to continue on with this family business and who's going to continue on with this side of the family business. And when you have people that you're accountable to at the conference room table for a mediation or for a motion, that weighs on you heavily, and so you're always worried about that. And so for me, it's always constantly thinking about how am I going to work to make sure my clients are protected, but at the end of the day, on the civil side of things, how are we going to work to get a resolution for everybody?
Okay, thank you. For several years, the Bee has reported about this backlog in criminal cases in our Stanislaus courts. Both of you have made references to judicial efficiency. Let's talk about about a judge's role in moving things along and what you might do. Do you see yourself as someone that adds to this problem or would help to cure it? Colleen.
So, having run a law firm for the last 10 years, I don't know anything else other than have to be efficient, because we have to run our files efficient. I'm accountable to people who will walk in and fire me. So if we are not efficient, if we don't move our cases along, if we don't do everything that we can for those clients to move their cases along, and sometimes that includes, hiring a private arbitrator for the case to arbitrate the case instead of going to jury trial because we can't get a trial date soon enough. Years ago, we used to be able to get a hearing on civil within 20 days. It's difficult to get a hearing that quickly anymore. It's difficult to get trial dates. That's why a lot of us have started hiring private retired judges to arbitrate our cases. My goal would be to get it back to getting people hearing dates within 20 days, getting them orders and rulings on their motions, getting the cases to trial if the parties want to go to trial, so that they're not having to spend their own money out of their pocket hiring arbitrators to do this. We're supposed to be providing this service to our community, and I want to be able to do that in an efficient manner, the way I've run my law firm.
Good. Jeff?
Well, I think that's one of the differences between our backgrounds, because I think with the experience of working in a law firm, the point isn't to make money. I think working and being in court every single day, I have the real world experience. I know how impatient people get. I know how frustrated people get waiting in the courtroom. There's a saying that says a continuance is just as good as an acquittal, except it doesn't last as long. Because defense attorneys and other attorneys know that when a case is delayed, witnesses pass away, witnesses disappear, they can't be located, it's hard to find, and most importantly, memories fade. I once had a judge during the middle of a jury trial, the jury was in the box, called in both of the attorneys, because it was a co-defendant case, so it was 2 defense attorneys and myself, in the judge's chamber, and he proceeded to play his wedding video. And he was very proud of it because he had a famous person in his wedding presiding over it, but he proceeded to play the wedding video. And it was a lovely wedding and a lovely video, but not while people are waiting. So it was wasting the times of jurors, witnesses, court employees, the public. Now, if I'm an elected judge, that type of abuse would not happen.
Very good. How do you deal with difficult people, Jeff?
Well, it depends on the circumstance, whether it's a witness, a victim, a defendant, or sometimes even a judge. You pretty much just have to have that judicial temperament to just be calm, allow people to vent, speak their mind, and then in a rational way go forward. I think everyone gets frustrated, especially when it's dealing with the legal system or with laws. People just get, fed up for whatever reason. And I think one of the reasons why they're in court is because they're fed up. They're filing a lawsuit, or somehow they have victimized someone else, or they've been a victim themselves. So there's a lot of personalities that you have to deal with, and I think being cool, calm, and allowing your past experiences and real life situations come into play, I think it allows, at least me, to have everyone say what they want to say and vent.
Colleen?
Yeah, I've dealt with this in many different roles as an employer with employees. I've dealt with it with my clients, with witnesses, just general people in running the firm. But what I found is, ultimately, if you treat that person with respect, a lot of times you can find a mutual ground where you can figure out what's going on. A lot of times with litigation and with cases, this is the worst time of their life. This is a time period that they want to forget. They want to get out of the court system. And so if you give them respect and you are calm and you're collected with them and you treat them like a human being, you don't act like you're above them, but you act like, look, we're just 2 people and we're trying to figure out what's the problem, and you just talk with them, a lot of times difficult people can become rational. Now, it isn't always the case, and then at that point in time, you have to be firm with people, and you have to know when to be firm and how to implement certain protocol in order to make sure the process isn't being contaminated moving forward in that direction.
Okay. Talk about one of your favorite Supreme Court justices and explain what appeal they have for you.
I don't know that I have just one. I think for me, it is being a Supreme Court justice is all of the respect that I have for their ability to get there and their ability of what they've done. And a lot of it is, some of it was trial work, but some of it is what we do on the civil side of things every day. It's emotions, it's having to know the law. Sometimes we go into cases and we're arguing to the judge what law we want to apply to this case, and the other side is arguing what law they want to apply to the case. The Supreme Court justices, they're the ones that decide ultimately what law is going to apply to the case. And the respect in being able to analyze that and the legal analogies that goes into that, there isn't one that I could pick, because they all deserve the respect in getting where they're at, because they've had to do all the grunt work to get there, and they've had to learn the law so well that they're able to provide all these beautiful analogies and legal analyses. And so for me, I just can't pick one.
Jeff, same question?
Well, I think there's several, but one of them that sticks out to me is Oliver Wendell Holmes, just because he had a common sense approach to how he drafted his opinions, and his his rationale and his analysis in his opinions. But for the most part, I think it isn't so much about the Supreme Court justices, but the decisions they make and the rationale for the decisions that stand out to me. So I'm not as impressed with the individual judges as I am with just the decisions and the precedents that's being made.
Is there a local judge from Stanislaus courts, either active or retired, that you look up to and why? Jeff?
That's kind of a loaded question. But, I think in the bench as a whole, there are several that I look up to and admire, and there are several that I think that I would try to emulate because of their decision-making process. I currently have several active judges that have endorsed me, so I can't just pick one of those. I also have several retired judges that have endorsed me, so I'm just going to say that there are several judges that I would emulate and that I think have done a good job.
You're learning to be a politician. Colleen?
Well, there have been a lot that have been influential, and in terms of my experiences, not just in this county, it's throughout California, especially throughout Northern California, and a little bit on the federal level as well. But there is one judge who I can say who has been a phenomenal mentor to me, and that's Judge Johnson. And when he was on the bench, he got to see me in court a lot.
It's a common name. You're talking about Earl Johnson,
Yes.
I assume.
Yes, and then since he's been off the bench, he does mediations for a lot of my cases, and he's well respected in our community. And one of the things that he's really taught me is how to look at cases from a neutral standpoint in terms of looking at both sides, really working towards a resolution, and that applies to civil cases. He had a civil background, he sat on the civil bench, and so that mentorship has been really great for me.
This next question is sort of a two-parter, but I'm still only going to give you 1 minute. We at the Bee take very seriously the people's right to know what's going on in their court system. Under what circumstances might you seal court proceedings or files? Number one. And number two, are you the kind that would accept cameras in the courtroom? Why or why not? Under what circumstances? Colleen?
I think there's a couple different circumstances where things are sealed. And I know from the civil side of things, sometimes when there's confidential private information pertaining to taxes and financial information, that portion of the record will be sealed by way of stipulation of the parties and then the judge affirming it. In terms of sealing the record simply because the case is maybe a high-profile case or something like that, if the press is going to contaminate the jury, so to speak, with regard to what's being reported, and there isn't a way to isolate the jury, I think that might play a role in my decision on whether I would or would not allow cameras in the courtroom. But presuming that we are able to isolate the jury in a way that would not affect their decision, I believe that our community has a right to know what's going on, and they have a right to hear what's being testified to and see what's going on in the courtroom. And so unless there was some sort of contamination reason, I don't believe there would be a reason that I can think of right now where I would exclude the press.
Very good. Jeff?
I would take it on a case-by-case basis. If I were a judge and that issue was before me, I think you have to look at the big picture, the type of case. For instance, if there's some type of political corruption, or if there's an overriding right for the public to know, or some type of public policy issue in question, I think I could see why there would be an overriding reason to have the press, specifically cameras in the courtroom. However, in certain type of cases, whether it's civil or criminal, say you have a rape victim on the stand, I think her privacy should not be thrust out into the world by exposing her and her identity out in TV or whatnot. Or in certain type of cases, and this happens quite frequently, you have confidential informants or confidential witnesses. Again, you don't want to publicly broadcast their identity. It's hard enough to get people to come forward in certain types of crimes, whether it's gang related, whether it's murder, or like in some types of cases, rape cases. So it would be on a case-by-case basis.
For the record, I'm not aware of the Bee wanting to put rape victims on the stand on the front page. Perhaps I'm wrong, but I believe that we have certain standards as well. Colleen, did you answer the question about cameras?
I thought I did,
Okay.
but I can.
That's
Okay.
Patty's saying that you did. I'm just a little slow. Tell us something that you appreciate about your opponent, Jeff. 30-second answer.
Well, we both served on the Bar Association together, and I thought we worked well. I was president, and she was the board member, and I thought we worked well together. We were able to accomplish a lot, whether it was the golf tournament or whatnot. So,
You've worked together before?
Yes.
All right. Colleen, 30 seconds.
My opponent is a good guy, and I think that his heart is always in the right place. When I've worked with him, and what I've seen of him is that his heart really is in the right place.
Think of all the cases that you've handled. Which one was the most difficult? Tell us about it.
I would say one of the most difficult cases was involving about 20 family members. And it involved business fraud and elder abuse. And anytime that you're dealing with family members and those types of allegations, emotions are extremely high on multiple levels and amongst multiple people. And the difficult part of this was also looking at it from a human standpoint and not just being a lawyer. I could be a lawyer and I could say I want my day in court because I want another trial on my list, and I could make a lot of money doing that. But that wasn't the right thing to do, and it was the right thing to do was actually more difficult, and that was to get everybody in rooms and to figure out how we're going to fix this, how we're going to fix the emotions of these family members, how we're going to fix the books in terms of correcting what was done wrong, and how we're going to move forward. And so to me, that is more emotionally difficult than just saying, I'm going to fight one side and I'm going to go to trial.
Thank you, Jeff.
One of my cases, in fact, it happened to be my very first murder case, which was a love triangle that took place outside of Turlock. And what happened was that all three of the participants were chefs at restaurants down there. One was a chef at Lada's, one was a chef at AJ's Cafe, and one was a chef at Perco's, which is now the Blackberry Diner, I believe. And one lady decided to get rid of the competition and burn the other lady's house down in the middle of the night. So she went there with a 1-gallon bag of rosemary soaked in alcohol, placed it in the front of the house, and lit it on fire. Fortunately, everyone was able to escape from the house, but 2 months later, she repeated it and perfected the recipe by bringing 2 1-gallon bags of rosemary soaked in alcohol, placed one in the front of the house, one in the back of the house, essentially sealing everybody inside. And fortunately, the other lady wasn't able to escape. 3 other people were able to escape. Now, that was my very first jury trial about 10 years ago. And it was difficult because the son who was able to escape heard his mother screaming from inside the house but couldn't do anything about it, and told me, we're placing our hands with you so that you could seek justice.
Those are stories. I want to hear more. We'll give you 10 minutes each. No, I'm joking. But it sounds like you could entertain a crowd for a while. In the race for seat 5, do you support John Main, Jared Carrillo, or Ken Hara?
You know, I worked with all 3 of them extensively. I know them personally, and I think all 3 of them are great.
Colleen. Oh yeah, this is a 30-second answer, but you don't even need that, but go ahead.
I've actually not worked with any of them, and so I don't have a preference on any one of them in terms of who I'm endorsing or who I'm supporting.
In the race for seat 6, do you support Annette Reese or Sam Getrich? Sam, 30 seconds, or no more.
I've not worked with either of them directly, and so I don't have an endorsement for either one.
Jeff.
And again, I've worked with both of them extensively. I know them well. In fact, in this judicial election cycle, there are 3 DAs who are running, and each of us are taking and running for a seat. I was the prosecutor of the year. I was past union representative for all the attorneys. I was voted by the attorneys in our office to represent all the DAs as well as the public defenders and the attorneys from the Department of Child Support Services. So it'd be almost a conflict for me to say something negatively about one of my fellow coworkers, and plus I think they're all great.
Why should voters choose you over your opponent, Jeff?
Voters should choose me because of my extensive trial experience and my dedication to public service and public policy and to public safety. Worked with over, I have had over 60 jury trials, including 6 murder cases, and because of my dedication to public safety, I think people should vote for me on March 3rd.
Colleen?
I believe that people should vote for me because of my wide range of experience. I don't have experience in just one area of civil. It's all sorts of areas. As part of civil, I've handled 22 wrongful death cases. So a lot of my civil cases have an overlapping of criminal elements to them. I handled a case where a woman was accused of wrongful death when she was defending herself and she sought the other side, but she was sued civilly. I've handled public entity defense for City of Modesto over the years, City of Turlock, City of Sirius, City of Newman. Over the years, I've also, like I said earlier, handled family law, probates, estate litigation, conservatorships, bankruptcies. The gamut is so wide that I could fit anywhere in there. And I don't just have trial experience. I have over 30 trials and arbitrations. Arbitrations are just like trials. But I also have the experience in terms of law in motion. I have a published opinion with the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals. I have over 20 motions for summary judgment and or appeals that I have filed. So I've argued before the appellate court. My experience in terms of being able to protect the record so that it doesn't get overturned on appeal is pristine in that regard. I have such expansive experience in that. And I believe that my wide range of experience can fit anywhere.
Excellent. That almost served as a closing statement. It wasn't meant to. So we're going to give you just a bit more time if there's anything you want to kind of tie a bow on.
Yeah. I also have experience as being a neutral. So like I said earlier, I sit Judge Pro Tem for Stanislaus County already as traffic, in the traffic division. And I also serve as an arbitrator for the California State Bar. So I hear disputes as a neutral person between clients and their attorneys. And if there isn't anything disproportionate and having to, weed out what's disproportionate is those types of cases because you've got an attorney versus a client. And I'm really proud of, being able to look at those cases and look at the facts and the law and making sure that I'm issuing an order that is fair and equitable and according to the law in those types of cases. So I have that experience. Also, in the first part of my career, I served for over 7 years for youth court, where misdemeanor cases were transferred over to the youth court program, and I served as judge on over 200 of those cases as well. And so I feel
And
like
those are criminal cases, aren't they not?
they were, yes, they were transferred from the regular juvenile justice system over to the youth court program, and we heard those cases, and the sentencing on those was different than your regular system. There was more like community service type efforts involved.
Thank you. Jeff?
So I also served on youth court, and youth court is a juvenile diversion program, and that's something that's pretty much run by the kids. Kids are the attorneys, and kids are the jurors, and you also have the juvenile offender. And basically it's a lot of low-level offenses, first-time offenses such as making a swear word at school, or talking loudly at school, or asking someone to fight. Normally they're Penal Code Section 415 or low-level offenses like that for first-time offenders. And serving on youth court for my first couple years, working in the DA's office, I too had experience of trying to be fair and impartial and how to assess the information. But I also have extensive experience as I'm also a licensed real estate broker. I've been a real estate broker for about a decade, and that has allowed me to run the white-collar aggravated white-collar fraud unit, which includes mortgage fraud, elderly abuse, probate courts, and stuff like that.
Thank you. Thank you both very much for coming. We know that it's a sacrifice to put yourself out there and sometimes a hardship to run. We appreciate your service.